Good evening, everybody. Could we bring the meeting to order with apologies for absence, please? Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest in matters before us this evening? None. If not, can we approve the minutes of the last Cabinet meeting on pages 1 to 14 of the agenda? Are they agreed? Thank you. And to confirm that the items of business marked Part 1 will be considered in public and that the items of business marked Part 2 will be in private. Reports 5 to 12 are public reports and 13 to 14 private reports. So, the first report before us this evening, agenda item 5, review by the Residents' Education and Environmental Services Policy Overview Committee on littering and fly tipping in Hillingdon. Councillor Courthouse.
Thank you, Leader. I shall begin by moving the report and recommendations and then deferring to the Chair of the RESPOC at this stage.
Thank you, Councillor Cawthorne. Could I call upon Councillor Bridges to present the report? Councillor Bridges.
Thank you, Leader, and good evening to everyone present. As Chairman of the Residents' Education and Environmental Services Policy Overview Committee, it gives me great pleasure to present this report to Cabinet, which details the 2019 to 2020 Committee's review of littering and fly tipping in Hillingdon. The topic has been one of great concern to members and residents of the borough, as evidenced by the Council's call centre logging over 19,000 inquiries relating to such matters over the 12 months preceding the review. Issues regularly being raised include fly tipping on borough highways, fly tipping on council-owned land, drug-related litter and refuse on street paths and highways. During the committee's information gathering and call for evidence sessions, they heard from a very wide range of views, including those of council officers, community leaders, residents and voluntary organisations. Throughout the review, the committee was pleased to learn of the effective actions the council was taking to combat the blight of littering and fly tipping within the borough. Such actions included a commitment to remove all fly-tipped waste within 48 hours, or work being undertaken to strengthen the relationship with the police service, to increase vehicle stop and searches in order to intercept waste while it is in transit. However, the review has also identified additional scope for the council to work with residents and volunteer groups to better highlight the impact and consequences of littering and fly tipping. The committee is particularly enthused at the potential for more community engagement to help identify and prosecute perpetrators. On behalf of the committee, including those past members involved in the review, I would like to thank all the witnesses for their participation and valuable contributions, and therefore recommend this review to the Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bridges. Councillor Cawthorne.
Thank you once again, Leader. I'll start by saying that littering, of course, and fly tipping really is an affront to the great silent majority of our residents who want to live in a clean and pleasant environment, thanks to the thoughtless, inconsiderate and downright criminal behaviour of a minority who don't hesitate to impose their own low standards on the rest of us. It's also, as the report points out, something which is very resource intensive and requires a considerable organisational effort to tackle. Therefore, this has been a timely opportunity to examine the issue in detail, to build on existing work and develop ideas, drawing on good practice from elsewhere, as we seek to make the very best use of finite resources to tackle this blight upon our community. Now, the recommendations highlight a number of opportunities to strengthen our approach. To highlight one or two of these, the work with landlords and tenants, and of course targeted activity in hotspots supported by a hard-hitting comms campaign. But education and partnership are also key themes. The witness sessions, as we've heard, drew out examples where residents groups are working in different parts of the borough to assist with litter picking, and this is certainly something we can support, encourage and build upon. Funnily enough, my first engagement with this was when I happened to be at the Keep Britain Tidy witness session, long before I had any idea that this was to become part of my new Cabinet responsibilities. And we've drawn on this with the publicised September litter picks, although community litter picking goes on all year round by groups, large groups, and by individuals who go around collecting litter. Some of the recommendations are already in place, and there are others which have some challenges that we are going to have to consider as a starting point for further consideration. But there are certain things that are already in place. And I would like to thank, firstly, the POC for a very sound piece of work, for an insightful report and a set of recommendations to take us forward. I'd like to thank our staff at the sharp end, dealing with this issue on a day-to-day basis. And finally, I'd like to thank those many public-spirited residents with a very keen sense of civic pride who work with us all year round without fanfare or publicity to help keep our borough a pleasant place to live. Leader, I commend the report and recommendations to Cabinet. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cawthorne. Are there any other comments? If not, Councillor Bridges, once again, this is good work as we have come to expect from your Policy Overview Committee. Would you please, as Councillor Cawthorne indicated, take the thanks of Cabinet back to your committee? Are the recommendations agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 6, page 69, Hillingdon Safeguarding Partnership Annual Report 2019 to 2020. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Leader. I'm pleased to move the Hillingdon Safeguarding Partnership Annual Report 2019-20. Contained within this excellent document are the changes of safeguarding arrangements in line with legislation, which illustrate comprehensively how coordination between our children and adult safeguarding boards have been successfully strengthened to protect our residents. Thanks to the Social Care, Housing and Public Health Overview Committee for its positive comments and oversight, and in particular their comments regarding reassurances that during the height of COVID-19, residents were still able to obtain support and make contact with the local authority. The report illustrates clearly the joined-up partnership working of children and adults safeguarding in our borough. From an adult's perspective, work has prioritised financial abuse, exploitation, domestic abuse and making safeguarding personal, MSP. I am pleased to see a shared priority across adult and children's services of modern slavery. This particular priority affects adults and children alike, and the aim to raise awareness and develop a referral pathway is a clear example of the benefits of a joined-up children and adult safeguarding process. As the Chair of the Domestic Abuse Steering Committee, I am pleased to lead an effective and comprehensive strategic network in response to the harm caused by domestic abuse in all its forms. This crime affects children and families, and our joined-up safeguarding approach does much to ensure victims and children are protected. The domestic abuse inquiry form is now across all services. We work closely with our health professionals, safeguarding partners in the Hillingdon Hospital, Hillingdon CCG, the Metropolitan Police and Heathrow Airport, all of which help to ensure residents are appropriately safeguarded. Our dedicated Deprivation of Liberty Safeguard team is well respected and high performing. At all times, our residents' human rights, safety and well-being is paramount. Training of staff continues to be delivered during these difficult times to ensure safeguarding awareness is high priority. Everyone has the right to live free from abuse or neglect, and in Hillingdon, our council officers, adult children's social care teams and our partners work effectively to enable that right to be upheld. This report is of high quality and reflects the professionalism and dedication of our social care teams. My thanks to them all for their work to ensure that our residents are safeguarded from harm. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Councillor O'Brien.
Thank you, Leader. My colleague Councillor Palmer has already spoken about the adult partnership, therefore I will restrict my comments to the Safeguarding Partnership Annual Report 2019-20 and the effectiveness of the Hillingdon Safeguarding Children Partnership. The partnership launched in 2019 and consists of the Council, Hillingdon CCG and the Metropolitan Police, who have worked together towards the common goals that every child and young person is able to feel safe, enjoy good physical, emotional and mental health, have pride in themselves, to feel they belong and have the opportunity to thrive. The report provides assurances that the children in Hillingdon are safeguarded and the response they receive from safeguarding partners optimise their safety, well-being and quality of life. I would draw your attention to point 5 of the report, page 16 or 88 on the agenda, and I will remind us of the comment from the Ofsted focused visit earlier this year in February. Effective multi-agency communication, cooperation and collaboration ensure that vulnerable young people and their wider associations are identified early and preventative services are offered quickly. This section is also dedicated to the Hillingdon Children's Service, and I would personally like to thank the officers, managers and directors of the service, as within this section there are many examples of a committed, professional, diligent, above and beyond vocational children's services workforce. The changes of safeguarding arrangements in line with legislation presented in this report show how the structures have been aligned between the children and adult safeguarding boards, which has been strengthened in the new safeguarding partnership arrangement. To reflect this vision of joint collaboration, the boards are chaired annually on a rotational basis by a representative of each partner. This ensures equal responsibility to the partnership throughout shared strategic priorities and costs, but more importantly, our residents benefit from a service, regardless of age, which will become more dovetailed through joint working in the coming years. This recommendation is that the Cabinet notes the comments of this report, and I support this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Brien. Are there any other comments? If not, can I just say this report demonstrates the excellent work undertaken by both the Safeguarding Children's Partnership and the Safeguarding Adults Board, and it's going to be even more important as we move through these COVID-19 times. Is the recommendation agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 7, proposed licensing scheme for outdoor fitness instructors and tennis coaches in parks and open spaces. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. Well, this is, as the agenda item title suggests, perhaps as a result of COVID, this has been an exacerbated problem in that we are noticing a significant increase in the number of people using our parks for exercise. And of course that's a lot of the reason why we have parks. However, this is organised exercise, and these are exercise led by instructors, often with large groups of people, although often also it's one-to-one. So there is a variety and quite a significant variance between what is going on there. We've noticed, particularly with our tennis courts, which are freely available to residents, that a large percentage of the time available is now being booked out by people using them for free or for instruction. So they're getting free use of our tennis courts and making a business out of it. Now, as a principle, I don't think we have any objection to our outdoor spaces being used in this manner, but I do think, just as we did with the dog walking, the professional dog walkers, there is a need to add a layer of control for the benefit of our residents who may come a cropper, perhaps, if they're not led correctly. You'll see on page 129, starting on page 129, a draft programme of how we might go forward, and this report seeks to give to us, the leader, myself, the Cabinet member for Culture, Heritage and Commerce, Community and Regeneration, and others, the right to finalise the details of this scheme. But this is about ensuring that a fair price is paid. A lot of the instructors currently come from other boroughs. It's ensuring that standards are met, that there is a health and safety audit, that there is an understanding of where these exercises are going to take place, that there is an insurance policy in place, a first aid policy in place, a COVID policy in place, and that the people undertaking these training sessions are suitably qualified and indeed have passed safeguarding tests as well. This is about looking after our residents. This isn't about earning a quick buck. and on that basis, I move the 3 recommendations on the top of page 124. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. Are there any comments? If not, are the recommendations agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Agenda item 8, changes to Hillingdon's self-build and custom-build register, update and approval. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Leader. The report we've got here is just for Cabinet to receive the feedback following the consultation and further assessment of our proposed changes to the registration process for Hillingdon self-build and custom-build housing register. There are a number of recommendations which we have had to take into account following the consultation, and they are shown on page 139 and at the top of page 140. One recommendation which I will draw to people's attention is recommendation 4B, where it states British citizen or national of an EEA state, with a little asterisk, because we know at the end of this year Brexit one way or another is going to happen, and there could be further legislation going through which will mean we will have to change this again. But I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention, the fact that we do know that will go through, and we do know that we'll probably face another change further down the line. It does show the fees that are going to be involved with the registration process, and I so move these recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Burrows. Are those recommendations agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 9, Hayes Regeneration, Options Appraisal Report. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. In some respects, this is an update of a programme we kicked off some months ago, got held up slightly by the arrival of COVID, looking at the regeneration of 2 of our largest estates in the south of the borough, Austin Road and Avondale Drive. Both of these estates are, to put it politely, past their sell-by date, and certainly need significant investment if they're going to remain suitable or become suitable for the next number of years going forward. And as a result of this, we have undertaken, council officers have already undertaken a number of open days, explaining to residents, contacting, liaising with, seeking their opinion on the various options going forward, which range widely, from refurbishing what's there to more major works to complete redevelopment. This report is to seek our consent to move the thing along to the next step. It's a step-by-step process, and assuming this goes forward, we'll receive another report in due course, taking it further forward. As I said, there's a considerable number of homes. Austin Road is 260 homes, Avondale Drive is 144, and I'm pleased to say that large numbers of those residents have taken part. So, as an exercise in consultation, it's been a positive one, and it's been well received, even in these difficult times where contacting people has to be done very carefully. The recommendations are at the top of page 164, and essentially they are to move the proposals forward with some further design work, approve a residents' ballot, and in that respect I should say that it is essential that a ballot is instigated. The residents' opinion is fundamental, and the outcome of that ballot will determine where we go next in terms of this programme. The third recommendation is to approve the necessary expenditure. The fourth grants delegated authority to the leader, myself, and the Cabinet Member for Housing and Environment, along with the Director of Infrastructure. Actually, I think this person has the longest title, I think, going. I used to think the Deputy Chief Executive had a long title, but this one is the Director of Infrastructure, Procurement, Business Improvement, Communications, Waste Services and ICT. Thank goodness it's ICT and not written out fully. Anyway, to make the necessary, and finally agrees to receive a further report in due course once the outcome of the ballot is known. And on that basis, I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. Any other comments? Councillor Courthouse.
Just briefly, Leader, to add to what Councillor Bianco said, it's important to stress that there has been and will continue to be some very robust community engagement with this, particularly in identifying hard-to-reach residents And our approach very much reflects the requirements of the Localism Act in making sure that we involve residents in developing the site proposals, which is very much part of this, as we consult on the residents' charter and as we head towards the ballots that we've already heard about. What's also important, I think, is the support given to vulnerable residents, including the provision of independent advice, as set out in the report. As Councillor Baker says, it's pleasing to note there's generally been a good level of engagement so far. These things, by their nature, are not a given. There will be uncertainty at this stage, but working closely with the residents in this way gives us, I think, the best prospect of success. So I very much look forward to the next stage of this as it progresses. And I support the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cawthorne. Are the recommendations agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 10, response to the Government White Paper Planning for the Future. Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Leader. And it isn't the blue pages, as I'm sure most of you realised when you got your original agenda. Hence why we got a second paper come out. Now, we always have legislation come out of central government, and some of it makes sense. Unfortunately, this one doesn't. This one is so out of the field. I don't know whether the person was just bored. But anyway, we have what we have before us. And on page 4, it describes, the white paper is proposing what it describes as a radical reform. I have other words for that, and it's certainly not radical. But it is going to change the existing planning system, which would have potential significant changes to how we deliver planning within Hillingdon. And of course that would then have knock-on effects and impacts on our residents, businesses and other service users. So it was important that the Council did express our concerns and our views on the proposals. And I'd like to thank officers for getting this done in the short time they were given with such a large white paper that came out. And it is very robust, the comments that are going back to government, and I hope that someone is sitting there with some common sense and takes on board some of the comments that Hillingdon have made in putting its residents first and trying to protect the planning policy in a way that still works, but works for everybody in the format that we have at the moment. Because the radical changes they want to make, as I say, are so far off piece, it is unbelievable. This is probably one of the worst pieces of planning legislation we've had for a long time. So I move the 2 recommendations at the top of page 4, which notes the content of the Planning for the Future White Paper and endorses in principle the Council's proposed response attached as Appendix 1. And recommendation 2 grants delegated authority to the Deputy Chief Executive and Corporate Director of Resident Services to make any final changes to response before submission in consultation with yourself, Leader, and me as the Cabinet Member for Planning and Transportation. I so move those, and I'm sure that my Cabinet colleagues will fully endorse and accept those recommendations.
Thank you. Are there any comments, or can we fully endorse and accept those recommendations? Agree? Thank you. Agenda item 11, the Counter Fraud Strategic Plan for 2020-21. The recommendation, 2 recommendations. The first is to approve the updated Counter Fraud Strategic Plan for 2020-2021, including the Business Assurance Counter Fraud Team's operational work plan, which details a revised fraud risk assessment and strategic approach to fraud prevention and detection, which is in response to the significant changes to the fraud landscape that's been brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. The recommendation also has 6 counter-fraud related policies, including the Corporate Investigations Protocol, which have been updated to provide a corporate framework for anti-fraud and corruption and underpin the counter-fraud strategic plan in relation to bribery, money laundering, whistleblowing, prosecution and enforcement. Now, it's vitally important to have a clear strategy in place to define and direct the Council's approach to effectively manage both the internal and external risk of fraud and corruption. This demonstrates the Council meeting its statutory responsibilities and supports its vision of putting our residents first by ensuring that public funds are not lost to fraud and corruption. I think that's enough said. The recommendations are one, that we approve the strategic plan, and two, that we take those 6 policies that are detailed in the report. Agreed? Thank you. Agenda item 12, Council Budget 2021 Revenue and Capital, Month 5, Budget Monitoring. Councillor Bianco.
Thank you, Leader. It is as you say. This deals with the activities of Month 5, which is August. And it shows an improvement over the previous month of 734,000. A generally healthy place to be, and should produce reserves in March of next year at over 29 million. Now, there are 6 recommendations at the bottom of page 301 and at the top of page 302, which I will move shortly. It is clearly an uncertain time we are in. The COVID costs continue to mount, although we are in a good place in those regards in terms of government grants, either achieved, anticipated or expected, and any shortfall is well covered, as I'm sure you will touch on, Leader. Going forward into the long term, it's impossible to be sure what will occur, except that at the moment we are on a steady ship and things are going in the right direction. On the capital account, there is, month 5 shows an underspend of 46 million. Some of that is due to, well, a large part of that is due to rephasing. COVID, of course, has caused disruption into that programme. Some of it will be rephased to future years. Some of it is already back on track, and others of it we will review to consider the long-term aspects and look at individual programmes and schemes in due course. And on that point, Leader, I'll move the 6 recommendations and pass over to you, as I know you'll deal with more detail.
Thank you, Councillor Bianco. As you have indicated, it's a strong position at the end of August. Just over 1.5 million underspend, 1,570,000, which added to the projected balances gives us nearly 29.5 million projected at the 31st of March. The COVID situation is varying, obviously, on a day-to-day basis, but on a month-by-month basis, the COVID pressures are reduced by 217,000 from month 4, giving a total projected pressure, net of government grants, of 3.4 million, and we have 9.1 set aside to cover said 3.4 million, so we've got a bit of slack in the system yet for COVID pressures. The years going forward, we'll have to take this into account, but we are in a sound financial position in these troubling times. The recommendations Councillor Bianco referred to, recommendation 1, to note the budget position at August 2020, month 5, as outlined in table 1, that's on page 306, and it says, as we've already indicated, we're projecting balances of 29,475k, and the underspend is currently 1.70k. Recommendation 2 is to note the Treasury Management Update at August 2020 at Appendix E, that's page 349, and the important point to note is shown in paragraph 194. There were no breaches of the prudential indicators or non-compliance with the Treasury Management Policy and Procedures. Recommendation 3 is to continue to delegate authority to myself and the Chief Executive to sign off agency and consultancy appointments at the total over £50,000, and they're detailed in Appendix F, shown on pages 351 to 353. Recommendation 4 is the standard one for gift funding in relation to planning performance agreements, and these are in respect of Dowie Martyrs School, Cardinal Hume Campus, £16,250, Nanuxar Primary School, discharge of conditions, £7,500, Paddington Packet Boat, first payment, £10,000. Recommendation 5 is to accept a grant of 3,863k from the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy in respect to the Green Homes Grant Now this is funding which will be used to provide loft installation, cavity wall installation, low energy lights and double glazing across the existing council estate, and it will be reported under the HRA Works to Stop programme. And finally, to accept the next step accommodation programme from the funding from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government of £535,925 for continuing support to rough sleepers during the COVID response. This funding is ring-fenced, can only be used for that purpose. So, as I said at the beginning of my comments, this is a very sound position, and many councils in the country would be delighted to be in this position at the end of month 5 and having balances of that level being carried forward. We will, over the coming months, be working on the budget for next year and the medium-term financial forecast, which will be slightly more difficult than usual given the circumstances that we're in, but our level of balance is now earmarked reserves, plus the fact that government funding continues to be received. Indeed, we're receiving more today. Whilst it's a moving situation, we are in a good position financially. Are the recommendations agreed? Thank you. We now move to part 2 of the agenda.